Hello, and welcome to If It Were Up to Us, the podcast where we reimagine, rethink, and occasionally cause imaginary mayhem in the world of theme parks. We're starting with a full-blown redesign of our ultimate domestic Disney destination, retheming each park. No land, ride, or restaurant is safe. But don't worry, there's love in the chaos, and yes, churros are still sacred.
Woohoo! Whether you're a Disney diehard, a theme park nerd, or just here for the spicy takes, we're glad you're along for the ride.
If it were up to us.
Well, you'll just have to listen.
Well, hey, Steph, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Okay, so for those who don't know us personally, I thought we could just give ourselves a little introduction.
You go first.
All right. Hi, everyone. I am Chrissy. I am a lifelong Disney Parks fan who is obsessed with all things Disney history. I am a mom of 2 boys, a self-proclaimed chaos coordinator, and I honestly cannot wait to finally get my way, even if it's just imaginary.
I'm Stephanie, and unlike Chrissy, I didn't visit Disney until I was 25 years old, so I'm more of a newbie in the Disney world. That was 9 years ago, not to age myself. I'm also a mom, and I have a boy and a girl, and yeah, I'm super excited to actually figure out how I would want my perfect Disney destination.
I guess we should probably give our listeners a brief kind of background into how we came up with this idea, because I am so excited about it. So Steph and I recently had the opportunity to go out to Disneyland together. And now that we have both visited both sides of the Disney world, we decided, we had this conversation when we were on property about how we would redo things if somebody asked us. And believe us, no one asked us, right? No. We have no qualifications that give us the right to have this idea, but here we are. We had so much fun talking about it, and really kind of rethinking, like, I think, you know, the question that everybody asks themselves in a 75-minute queue, right? Like, what if I were in charge?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I remember the exact moment, too. I think it was our first night, and we were getting a little, like, evening drink. And I feel like you said something first. You're like, well, what would you put whatever? And then the whole time we were there, it was just, well, what about this? And then we'd go on a ride. We're like, oh, this one would definitely be in mind.
Yeah.
Or something. So,
yeah, you know, I think it was when we were waiting for World of Color, right?
Yeah, somewhere in there, yeah. And I think it's just so funny that it's actually turned into something. You're like, hey, wait, actually, let's do something with that, because that's a fun idea. People might be interested in listening to it.
And even if they're not, I was just kicking myself for not having recorded that conversation for the fun of it.
Gosh.
So
yeah, we should have just had microphones on us the whole time, because it was hilarious.
If only, right? Maybe that would actually be a bad idea. So yeah, that's how this podcast idea came to be, and we're glad that you're here to listen to it. Before we dive in, should we just take a minute for some Girl Gab?
Yeah, we probably should, because some news dropped this week.
Yeah.
Not like major, humongous, like some we expected, but yeah.
And some that came completely out of the blue. Yeah. So, so I mean, the first big thing, which is not necessarily parks related, but Disney changed their cruise line deposit amount. Or like standard policy. So
I will be curious if next year if they do a 50% reduced deposits, because now they're 50% less. So they went from 20 to 10%, which I think is great, because I definitely feel like it's a big ticket item that people want to plan in advance. Mm-hmm. And that initial out-of-pocket cost being as much as it was, I think was a little bit like, you know, a deterrent.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think, especially as somebody who just booked their first Disney cruise, like, I did it when the, I think it was like the 50% deposit offer was out. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out kind of moving forward.
Yeah. I'll be super curious. Yeah. And then the other news we expected was that Test Track now officially has an opening date. Test Track 3.0. Yes. I never experienced the first one, just the most recent, and then...
I think I did. because I want to say it was more, if I'm remembering correctly, or maybe I just dreamed this up. I don't know. It was like you were the crash test dummy in the vehicle, and so it was like, instead of you just along for the ride of them testing a vehicle, I think it was like, I just remember, if you see those like little squares that they have on crash test dummies, like I feel like there was a lot of that in the attraction.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. And so I'm curious. I haven't really paid too much attention to the new concept, so I'll be curious on July 22nd what is changed about it. Besides the facade, I saw is different. They took away some of those pillars and stuff that were kind of blocking it. So,
yeah. It's kind of, after having done like Radiator Springs Racers most recently, I feel like it's hard for me to think what it looked like before. So, yeah, I'm excited for that. Yeah. Maybe we'll have to make a trip.
I mean, we should. What other excuse do we have?
Right? And then they dropped some new concept art for Monsters, Inc. recently.
Oh, yeah.
And that whole land.
I did see that.
So what did you think of that?
The only noticeable difference I saw was it looks like they're keeping the fountain, like the Muppet fountain, in the new concept art. So I'm assuming they're going to replace, is it Miss Piglet? I'm not a Muppets fan. I'm sorry. Out. Isn't she like the Statue of Liberty or something? The middle?
I think you're right.
And then the other characters around. So I'm assuming they're going to put Monsters characters in that and keep it. Did you notice anything different about it?
No, I mean, it may have looked like marginally larger. I don't know if it was just the scale, but I mean, everything else looked pretty similar. It wasn't like they had inserted any new storefronts or restaurants. It looked pretty much the same, which kind of felt like, why are we just announcing a fountain? Is it a slow news week? Is that what we've got going on?
I wondered that, and I wondered, I can't remember, I guess back to August when they announced, it was August, right? D23, when they announced like the new roller coaster and stuff. Did they announce any other attractions there? Like shows? Because I'm wondering, will they keep the Muppet Vision theater as a theater and put a show in there?
Oh, yeah. You know what? I don't remember what they said they were going to do with that space.
And then I wonder what kind of restaurant, because they have all of Pizza Rizzo. That's a huge building that doesn't need to stay that big, I don't think.
Yeah, I do remember them, and I think it's in the concept art, like a Harryhausen.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
Sushi restaurant.
I do remember that.
I think they're putting that in, but, and I think that was still in the concept art that they just released as well.
I feel like I do remember that now. But yeah, this, I guess, is probably why this topic that we have came up is now, what are you going to do about Monsters, Inc. laugh floor? Like, I know it's okay to have different pieces in the different parks, but I just feel like how much more sense would that make there? So I'll be curious when we get to Hollywood Studios what we're doing about that.
I am right there with you.
Yeah, was there any other news?
Yeah, the other news, which I think kind of will lead us into our topic for today. So even though, we had kind of referenced earlier that we're basically giving people their fifth gate, right? Yeah. That Disney's building a new international park, Abu Dhabi.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. While we don't have a ton of information, about what this is going to look like, we do have kind of the corporate press release that was sent out. I think it was announced last month. But this is going to be the 5th international destination, 7th Disney theme park destination around the world. The thing that really kind of stuck out to me, and I know that our listeners are going to hear it when we kind of look at some of the other theme park ideas and how we're going to retheme them, was that what they're expecting this park or destination to look like is going to be really a deeply immersive entertainment experience. So I am curious, with as immersive as they have gotten in the parks with, Fantasy Springs and the Frozen Lands and Galaxy's Edge. Right? If we're looking at something that could potentially be like that throughout the entire park.
Yeah, like when they said that, I immediately, obviously, my mind went to Epic Universe. Because their new park is so immersive with Super Nintendo World and stuff. So I feel like that's must be the direction they're kind of leaning, is like really just putting you in. I'm very curious. I don't know if I'll ever make it out there, but I'm very curious.
I don't know either. It makes me excited for future concept art, and to see what they're planning. Yeah. So I am really excited for that. The other thing to kind of note, which again kind of leads us into our topic for the day, is really talking about why they picked Abu Dhabi in the first place. And one of the things that I noted in the press release is that they did reference the fact that it is located within a 4-hour flight from 1/3 of the world's population, which like I didn't even realize.
Wow.
So I think it really does kind of make sense that this then opens up Disney to, you know, a whole new portion of
the world.
Yeah. So yeah.
So now
okay.
I'm a little worried.
Yes.
I feel like just with that little bit of research you did, I'm a little worried about how hard you're going to come with me with a new new location. So
well, I tell you what, we can take a break and then you can kind of give us an overview of the location discussion we're going to have.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're back. So Steph, where are we starting today?
Well, we have to figure out where we're putting this destination and talk about, you know, how many parks we're going to have in it. And it's going to be big, so we have to know where we're going to put it. And seeing as I believe we both have 2 different ideas on where that's going to be.
I know for a fact that we do. So, yeah, I think, so you kind of talked about, or you just mentioned that we know it's going to be big. Do you want to kind of talk about kind of where or why it's going to be so big, or what we're kind of thinking?
Okay, so we've decided that it's going to be a 5-park destination because I think people have to, as you're listening to this, and if you're a Disney World and or Disneyland goer, you're going to have to break up with that idea right now and not hate us for what I'm about to say, because I need you to remember everything about the parks, but I also need you to forget that they exist while you're listening to this podcast. It will be easier that way, I promise. So we are going to make one Magic Kingdom. So there's not going to be a Disneyland park, and there's not going to be a Magic Kingdom in Disney World anymore. There's going to be one in the United States, and it's just one Magic Kingdom. So then we're also going to have a Hollywood Studios, an Epcot, an Animal Kingdom, and a California Adventure. And when we get to that, I think I want to rename it. I'm just saying. Anyways, so it's going to be a 5-park destination. So we need a lot of land.
Yeah. And for those of you diehard Disney fans, get excited. You're getting your 5th gate. It's just in one destination.
And with attractions you already know. Sorry.
Exactly. And so we did tell ourselves, like, if there's a better version of an attraction, we're bringing it in. Please don't hate on us as you listen to this podcast. And, you know, if we don't mention something, there's probably a pretty good chance we're including it somewhere else. So even though those are going to be kind of our parks, we really are retheming them. So the Hollywood Studios, as you know and love it, don't hate us. We're probably going to tear that apart. And,
exactly.
You know.
So you just have to remember it, but also I need you to forget about it. Like, It doesn't exist in this world during this podcast.
This imaginary world that we've made up where somebody really cares about our opinion.
Yes. And we have to agree upon the location.
We do.
So, because we can't have 2 of these imaginary worlds, it would be way too confusing.
Yeah.
So that's going to be our first thing, is debating on where this is going to be.
Yeah. I mean, if we're recreating the ultimate Disney destination, why would we have to travel to 2 coasts to get it, right?
That's right.
So, okay, Steph, so before we dive in, I have to tell you, I went down a research rabbit hole when I was kind of preparing for this episode. So, like, I probably went too far. and spent way too much time looking at things. But like I said, I love Disney history. I loved learning about how, you know, Disneyland came about and Walt's dream for that, and then how, like, all the ways that he would have changed what he did. And I mean, so here's one thing that I want to kind of note, and we had talked about this when we had the opportunity to tour Walt's apartment when we were in Disneyland, that like his ability to dream and be completely like undeterred from that dream, just yes. like that, I don't even know what the word is, but like, you know, he just was so passionate about what he wanted and made things happen, was really inspiring. And so when I was in my research rabbit hole, way down deep in there, one of the things that struck me was like, really for him, Walt Disney World was his ultimate Disney parks destination. You know, yes. The way he saw it anyways. The things that he didn't love about how Disneyland was built, he was correcting those and making changes. You know, his whole idea for what Epcot was supposed to be, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow, it just is, it kind of hit me in that sense, like, it's kind of a little connection to Walt, if you will, that we kind of get to have here while we retool and redesign, knowing what we know now. And
yeah
definitely.
Okay, it's our pipe dream.
Right, it's our pipe dream. Okay, so if you'll humor me, I thought I could maybe talk for a second about some Disney history, if you're interested.
Okay. Yeah.
So once Disneyland was built, people kept asking, you know, what are you going to do next, right? And Walt always said, like, well, you can't top pigs with pigs. You've got to do something different. And so we knew we now know early on after Disneyland was built, Walt had his eyes set on something bigger. And so in kind of looking at things, I learned that there were actually quite a few other potential locations that were considered outside of Florida. And it kind of all, you're going to have to forgive me because my dog is over here and I'm just waiting for a squeaky toy to hit. But this is what you get when you podcast from home. So anyways, so it was interesting to see that there were kind of multiple bids out there for cities to invite Walt and the Disney company to come out and maybe be the site for his next, you know, big thing. And so in preparing for today's podcast and looking at the different places that Walt's like search took him, I thought that I could just highlight a few of the places that I thought were kind of interesting, and I promise that I will link them back in how that helped me choose what I chose for my suggested location. Okay, so 1963, Disney and Lillian, so Walt and Lillian take a trip up to Niagara Falls, actually on the invitation of the Seagram's Liquor Company, which we all know Walt was like family man against, you know, alcohol in his parks.
Yep.
I thought it was very interesting that he gets invited out, but they visited what was known then as Seagram Tower, which is now the Tower Hotel. And Walt was actually captivated by this in Niagara Falls, enough to actually want to explore a partnership together on like a ride for the tower. Ultimately, this never came to fruition because they couldn't agree on like a licensing deal, which we now know like one of the big issues that Walt had around, or one of the things that he didn't so much like about when Disneyland was built, that was that he didn't have full control, right? Like once he built the park, things started popping up around it, and so he really wanted to take control. And I think that really starts even before that with you know, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit and losing that cartoon, and you know, not having control over that. I think that really kind of put this idea of like having control over his own destiny, and you know, his future plans, the forefront of his mind. So when he was planning for the next big thing, I think that like harpens back to that control or like need for control. Walt also loved the area there, but it's not a year-round location. Could you imagine being in Niagara Falls and having like Disney World in Niagara Falls? Like, it would be crazy.
No. Niagara Falls is actually only 3 hours away from me.
So have you been?
I'm in Northwest. Yes, of course. I was married in Niagara Falls.
No way!
Actually. Yes. Yes. So, absolutely not. It would be a seasonal park. And could you imagine Disney World only being seasonal? It would be 4 times as busy.
Yeah.
Trying to stuff all the visitors in those months.
It's just, I could not even imagine. So then, as Walt started to explore other locations, he ended up being approached by some other like cities and, potential destinations. And I'm going to go down a little bit of a tangent because if you don't know, I am born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. So I am a Midwest girl at heart. Go Cardinals. And I love that kind of connection that like Walt grew up in Missouri, and spent time in Kansas City and, was kind of a Midwest boy himself. And so I kind of found 2 different locations within Missouri that Walt had considered potentially doing something with. So we all know Walt idealized Marceline, Missouri, right? Mm-hmm. Like that was his perfect time frame. That's what Main Street is themed after, that turn of the century. And so Walt had considered doing something in Marceline. And what the idea ended up kind of being was a working farm that doubled as a tourist attraction, where people would visit animals and experience the magic of like working with their hands and planting something and watching it grow, right? That idea that I think kind of stemmed from what he enjoyed about being in Marceline and living on the farm when he was there. But when a feasibility study was conducted, it was really determined that Marceline was far too off the beaten path for it to be a tourist destination. But Walt didn't want to leave it alone. Walt actually, he and a friend created a nonprofit organization, and they purchased the land that his family home was on under this nonprofit corporation. And then the nonprofit sold it to Disney. So they were able to buy the land for pretty cheap using this nonprofit. And then what they ended up doing is after the project was basically abandoned after Walt passed away, but the family friend who originally started the nonprofit ended up buying the land back from Disney and gave it to Walt's daughter as a wedding present. And we now know that to be the Disney Hometown Museum. So that's kind of cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Love that.
I also love the idea that like what we now know to be the way that all of the land for Disney World was purchased was under these like shell corporations and stuff. It's kind of like a little hint back to that, right? So I thought that was kind of cool. Okay, so the big thing that like I am particularly excited about is the St. Louis project. In 1963, St. Louis was undergoing a riverfront revitalization project. If you're not familiar with Missouri and where St. Louis lies, it's along the Mississippi River. And so St. Louis has a riverfront, and right now that area is where like Busch Stadium is, where the St. Louis Cardinals play. So the whole idea of the riverfront revitalization project was happening at the same time that the St. Louis Arch was built, right? So city officials had actually contacted the Disney company to produce a film to celebrate the city's 200th anniversary and to kind of use it as a promotional piece for this revitalization project. So Walt, he was really excited about that, excited about the idea of, revitalizing that area. Also, the amount of space that they were going to have. The highways that kind of run through St. Louis also intersect kind of at that area too. So there was some really exciting things as far as building an attraction in St. Louis goes.
I never knew this. This is all new news.
So, like I said, there were a lot of exciting things happening, right, with this revitalization project that really drew Walt's attention. So he had actually suggested an entertainment project based on the city's history, right? Westward expansion, Lewis and Clark, things that we know Walt was really interested in.
Yeah, he loved America and how it was made.
Right.
And, like, yeah.
So what ended up being kind of conceptualized was that the city was going to give Disney, the Disney company, the space. And the space ended up being about 160,000 square feet of space there right on the riverfront. And it was right close to right close to the interstate. So one of the things that they immediately kind of had said was red flags for them was that they were concerned about what to do with the project during the colder months. Like we all know, Midwest winters are rough. It's snowy. It's not exactly a year-round destination. So what ended up happening was an indoor entertainment venue was suggested, which ended up being a project called Riverfront Square. So for my Disney fans who have been around since when Disney Springs was Downtown Disney, if you want to kind of visualize this, it was very much it had very much Disney Quest vibes. So if you ever went down to Downtown Disney and saw Disney Quest, very much vibes like this. The whole space was going to be indoors with a bunch of different attractions, right? But they were also going to have like a banquet hall and restaurants and lounges and a bar and even an observation floor, which ties back to the visit he had with up in Niagara Falls and the tower. He loved the views from up there, so he wanted to make sure that people could really take in the views from the riverfront. There was going to be retail shopping, a Circle Vision theater, attractions with animatronics. And here's the thing that I think was super, super cool. Some of the proposed attractions for this space actually ended up in Disneyland. So just tell me if you can kind of recognize what any of these were. So there was going to be a Blue Bayou boat ride and explorable pirate ship based on Jean Lafitte. Pre-Civil War haunted house with a stretching room elevator. A ride based on folk legend Mike Fink. And a Western riverboat ride and design and theming that very much resembled kind of the proposed Thunder Mesa area. So any of that. Yeah. So any of that sound familiar to you?
So I'm thinking Haunted Mansion, obviously, with the stretching room. Pirates of the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. What else?
I mean, I and again, I'm not the Disneyland pro, but I think there were even like Mike Fink keelboats, I think is what they were called at some point. But yeah, so a lot of the attractions that were first kind of thought up for this like westward expansion ended up changing just a little bit and coming to fruition in the Disney parks, which is super cool, right? Like I love that idea.
That is really cool.
As a St. Louis native, I wish this had come to fruition. Like, so, I wanted this so bad when I learned about this. I was like, why did this not happen? What happened? And ultimately, you know, one of the things that they were kind of up against, besides like the non-year-round weather, was the St. Louis community actually kind of had some opposition against it. Walt wanted a family-friendly destination, which we know there's no alcohol, you know, in his theme parks, right? That's not something he wanted to have. If you're not familiar with St. Louis, you should know that Anheuser-Busch, the home of Budweiser beer, like that's a huge part of our community. So, in fact, Augustus Busch Jr. publicly shamed Disney at one point, calling him crazy for thinking that he could build anything in St. Louis that did not have alcohol, like an alcohol component, which is like bold move, sir.
Wow.
Yeah. But Disney actually compromised. So a lot of people think that that was the reason this fell through. Disney actually compromised and said, no, I agree. We want to make sure that we're being true to the community. So, he saw the logic in representing the community, and understanding the need to support the local community, and would allow the sale of alcohol in select locations. So, but what actually ended up causing the project to fall through was Walt was only going to agree to do this if it would be built and operated by the Disney company. Again, back to that control factor, right? But he really wanted the city to pay. They had just built Disneyland. He was in the process of considering, something else, something new. And so he really didn't want to have to bring in investors like he did with Disneyland. He didn't want to have people have an outside say. But he did also need the cash, right? The city ultimately said, if we're going to pay for it, we're going to operate it and do it our own way. And Walt said, if it's going to have my name on it, it's going to be operated by me. And that's ultimately where things kind of fell apart, which makes me so sad. I just wanted to be like, come on, St. Louis, just let him do whatever he wants to do. Okay, so for me, what that boiled down to was, one, I probably need to do a little less research and not get so excited about things, because I spent way too much time on that. But it's just fascinating to me, all of that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know any of that. Well, that's
the
wild.
More you know.
That's right.
So in doing all of that, what really kind of stood out to me was there were kind of 4 determining factors for what made, or what I guess the Disney company was looking at for their next destination, right? This grand plan that Walt had. And I think those 4 things that it boils down to were existing infrastructure, the space, the weather, and the control. And so I have an idea for where I want to put my park, or where I want to put our park.
Yeah, I'm nervous.
Okay, so I will say part of it is a little bit selfish, because the St. Louis thing didn't happen, so I didn't have that growing up with, that part of me wants to put it where I live now. But so I'm going to tell you, I want to put it somewhere in Texas, but before I get into specifically where and why, I want your thoughts. Where do you think we should build our park?
Okay, so I know everybody is going to say this is a cop-out, but I think where Walt Disney World is actually the perfect location. Because we're also building this park in the now. We're not going back, so we have to think about the present things that are happening. And I think leaving Universal in the Orlando area to just have all that space and land to do whatever it wants with would be detrimental to Disney.
Oh, that's a good point.
I also feel like it's the perfect location to build bigger vacations. So if people don't want to just go and stay at Walt Disney World, they can go to Universal. They can go on a cruise. They can go to either side of the coast for beaches. Uh-huh. It's also cheap. If you think about it, it's cheap to fly, for most people, to fly to some airport in Florida. And if you can fly cheap toward Tampa, you're close enough to just drive over. Cheap to fly into Orlando. You can now have the Brightline that takes you even further down. Mm-hmm. I just feel like it's a perfect already there hub. And the big one is that I think especially we can see what Universal can do with Epic Universe. And I feel like if Walt Disney World was taken out and they had all that land, they would snag it up. They go, okay, let's go even bigger. I don't know. I know it's a cop-out, but I also feel like it's not. It's perfect weather. Yes, you have hurricanes, but if you think back to all of the history of the hurricanes, they've never caused horrible damage to that area.
That's true.
Knock on wood. I don't want to jinx anything.
Don't put that juju out there.
Yeah, even with that, we went through a hurricane together while we were there.
We did. Uh-huh.
So,
we did weather that storm. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I just feel like it is the perfect spot. So I'm curious because I've also been to Texas, and I don't think Texas is a bad idea. I'm just curious where in Texas.
Okay. So I once again went down a research rabbit hole. And I completely agree with the fact that, like, where else are we going to get that kind of space, right? And so that was the first big thing, is like, we have the size of Disney World is like 27,000 acres, I believe.
Yes.
I mean, it's the size of Manhattan, right? So where else are we going to find the space? And again, we're doing this as if Disney said, current day, we're going to create an ultimate destination. So where are we going to find that kind of undeveloped, like, land? And so that took most of the east of the Mississippi River out of the picture, right? Yeah. But Texas is giant. And if you've never been, like, even if you've, like, been to Texas, you've probably never really been to Texas until you've driven across the state, right?
Oh, for sure.
We have over 268,000 square miles. The only state that is larger than us is Alaska, right? So I think it's like you could fit, like, 5 or 6 other states in the space that is Texas. So for reference, like, our population in the state of Texas makes up almost 10% of the U.S. population. Like, we're big. We got that space. In fact, so for comparison, because I know you've flown in to DFW Airport before, and I know it's your most favorite airport ever.
It is.
The airport alone, right? The space the airport takes up is the size of Disney World.
Yeah. I can believe it.
Right? So we got
I ran across it. I believe it.
Hey, but you made that flight. So.
I did.
Okay, so in Texas, like, in addition to all that space, we also have 5 major airports. We've got 2 in DFW, George Bush International in Houston, Austin Bergstrom in Austin, and then San Antonio International. So the infrastructure, along with, like, the 20 or so interstate highways that cross the state of Texas, like, we got that infrastructure. We can get you places. So I'm going to get real specific here about the other 2 pieces, which were weather and control. Again, I had to kind of pull it in and think what made Orlando, because I can't argue with it's already there. Why would we change it? Like, that's hard to do, right? So I'm making my case. You are the judge. So my specific location that I want to put our theme park is within the San Antonio-Austin corridor. And here's why. So let me plead my case. One of the reasons is that there are already existing theme parks within kind of the suburbs, if you will, of the San Antonio area. So SeaWorld San Antonio exists there. There's also Schlitterbahn, plus a couple of more local theme parks. One of them specifically Morgan's Wonderland, which is an accessible theme park. And I bring those up to talk about, case in point, some of the, because again, we already have the land. Why would we sell it or do something different? One of the things that we would need if we were going to start this all over again is some help from the city in which we want to buy land. Obviously, Walt and Roy were able to get unprecedented control in creating basically their own city in Florida. Yeah. And we know that that's changing in current times. So using those existing theme parks as an example of what could possibly be. So when it came to building SeaWorld, Texas and the city of San Antonio itself provided discounted land and tax tax incentives, like property tax relief. They also provided tourism and marketing support. So that was a huge benefit to SeaWorld when wanting to build their park there. Schlitterbahn, the water park like destination. So the county in which like that park is or was built in used tax increment financing to support like the development of the theme park, which included rebates and property tax abatements. And in addition, the city also agreed to develop other attractions, restaurants, and like hotels to support bringing people in, things that were not already there, because it's not like it's a resort destination like Disney World is with their own hotels, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so that's my ultimate right, but I'm also going to make the case that Universal is also building a mini theme park here in the Frisco area, which is about 30 minutes away from me. So it's 97 acres in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for this like Universal Kids Resort. And even in our populated space that is Dallas-Fort Worth, we still were able to find some space. And city officials offered Universal some of those same kind of incentives. So we do see that happening. It's not the control that we have in Orlando, but it is that. It's something.
It's something.
I also would like to think if Disney came to Texas, Texas would be like, yes, we would love that. Thank you. So, but specifically the San Antonio, like Austin corridor. So Austin is like the third largest airport in the state of Texas, and there is the fastest highway in the whole of the United States that runs from Austin to San Antonio. So we can get you there real fast if you fly into either airport. The weather, okay, I'm just saying, like,
the weather, I'm curious about the weather.
So I did a little, again, a research rabbit hole. I went down, got out my Farmer's Almanac. So the average summer high in San Antonio is about 94 degrees. In Orlando, it's 92. Yeah. Not a huge difference.
And they're both pretty humid, right?
Yes, they're both decently humid, although San Antonio a little less than Orlando.
Okay.
The only real big difference is that it does get a little colder here. So
which could be good.
Right, I'm not mad about that. Although I say that, but as a Texan, when it gets cold, we don't really like it. So winter low is about 40 degrees. But Orlando's like 48, so a little bit of a difference there. Okay, but get this, right? We all love to, we talk about that Disney bubble and how people wish that there was a big dome over Disney World, because it would rain, and people hate that and think that that sucks. Well, average rainfall for Orlando is about 52 inches a year, but in San Antonio, it's only 32 inches, so, although sunny days, there are about 10 more sunny days in Orlando than there are in San Antonio. So I think overall pretty comparable weather-wise. It still makes a case for being a year-round destination. And as I was looking, and again, I don't know who owns the land, but there are large spaces of land.
We're coming and knocking. We're taking it.
Right? I feel like there are a couple of smaller cities around the San Antonio area, specifically between Austin and San Antonio, and kind of that Texas 130, which is that toll road that is has the 85 miles per hour, right? So like they kind of run parallel to each other, and so those cities have a lot of like ranch land. I'm sure someone owns it, but we could buy it and then we could build there, and then I could have an annual pass as a Texas resident, and that would be great.
Listen, I actually do love the idea of a Disney destination being more centrally located in the United States. Definitely not denying that.
Okay, so while you're thinking of that, did you know that 80% of the U.S. population lives east of the Mississippi River? So to have somewhere that has a major airport hub and is before you reach the, okay, geography people, don't come at me, and I might edit this out later. The mountain range, the Rockies, is that what we have? We have the Rockies? Yes, okay. Just making sure. I research, I don't know things, okay?
It was over here pulling this up on my phone because I needed to like visually see as you were talking about this. Yes, because I've only been to Houston, like in more than just the airport. Like I've been to Houston twice and explored, so I've seen 1% of Texas. So I had to visually see what you were talking about.
As someone who has made the drive from Dallas-Fort Worth down to like the Corpus Christi area, like we have to go through Austin and San Antonio and on the way down. Yeah. So like I can visualize it obviously a lot easier. But yes, so it's the space is there. But because when you think about the fact that like 80, whether you have to drive or fly to get there, it is an easier drive for 80% of the population. Not to mention that 80% of the population is coming from that area and not having to worry about, again, I know we're building now and not in times where people had to drive, but people didn't want to drive through the Rockies. So, when you kind of consider that it's centrally located and is a major hub for very, very many airlines, I think there's a case to be made there.
I might agree with you. I was just looking up just to see how far Houston was from Austin. And it's like about 3 hours. It can be a little less. Yeah. And you also have the case. Here I am on your side over here. Like,
I know.
Giving you more props. Disney comes to Galveston. Their cruise
Disney
line
sails it. Yes, they do.
Comes to Galveston. And they could probably, obviously, have more there. I feel like that port is developing more. I feel like that whole area south of Houston, between Houston and Galveston, is developing because we were actually looking at a house there. So I don't hate it.
Okay, and not to use your own points against you, because I did write down when you were talking about it that there are other destinations. There's other destinations. So I obviously, when you talk about the fact that like Universal is there, I've made the case there are already theme parks in that area. So that's kind of a bonus too. But not just that, but we have, all of the Texas history too, right? Yeah. So the Riverwalk and the Alamo and, there are so many. And then, beyond that, being able to say like, oh, we're going to fly and then now we're going to visit the state of Texas. You could make it a longer trip outside of just Disney.
Oh, heck yeah, you could. So I told you that you probably could sway me. I told you before we even started this.
You did say
that you very well may, because Orlando's just the easy out. But
okay, because once again I'm just doing my research. So let me float this
after this.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Let me float this idea to you. So one of the things that we know to be true about the property in which Disney owns is that there is a certain amount that's allocated for conservation, right? It is it is either undevelopable.
Sure.
Yeah. Or it's already, a certain percentage has to be designated for conservation, meaning Disney will not build on that land ever.
Yeah.
What we know about like looking at Reedy Creek Improvement District's maps are that a lot of the space around where Magic Kingdom was built is actually either undevelopable or is part of that's designated for conservation efforts.
Yeah.
So when you start doing that, that's why when you look at the map of Disney World, a lot of it has been built below, right, where the Magic Kingdom is. So
yes.
The other question becomes, can we fit our 5-park theme park into the space that currently exists? Or do we need to have new space?
I feel like we could, because we're keeping Magic Kingdom where it is. If we stay in Florida, Magic Kingdom's staying where it is, and we're building. Obviously, if we need more space, we know that there is possibility of it because they want to make the Villains area. So there is space north.
Yeah.
At the north end.
That's true.
We also know if we need Hollywood Studios to be bigger, there's space south because we have the useless Star Cruiser sitting there.
Oh, yeah.
So that fifth gate could probably even go down there. I guess you would have to really like get into it and see what is developable. Now I don't even know if that's a word. I don't think
we're making up words. We're making up theme parks. We're making up worlds. Okay.
I don't know. I'm kind of starting to lean more towards, even though I did look up to see how much further the drive would be, because we do drive to Disney World quite often. It's 21 hours to Austin, and it is only 16 to Orlando. So, but there's more airports. It also is more expensive for me personally to fly to Texas, though.
Oh, well, yeah, and you have, like, layovers galore, don't you?
Not if we go to... If we go to Houston, we always have a layover in Dallas first. But if we flew to Dallas... And I've never flown to Austin. So, and I know Austin is a popular layover place.
Yeah.
So... And I mean, I can't think only of me personally. There's how many other millions of people.
Yeah, I know. I had to also put, like, the selfishness of, like, wanting a park to be closer to me.
Because I guess...
It would surely bankrupt me.
We know that Walt Disney World gets a lot of UK visitors. A lot of other foreigner visitors, but I know that it's very popular in the UK to come here. Texas can't be much further.
Yeah.
But it may be far enough, because I feel like they may come to World instead of Land because of that. Also, Disney World's just,
I know.
I don't want to hurt the Disneyland people's feelings.
Look, we'll just preface this by saying that's our home park. We're sure we know Disneyland, you Disneyland lovers, that is your home park. We get that. We understand that. Okay, so what do we think? If you had to take a vote, what you know now, what's your vote? Is it still keep it where it's at, or have I swayed you?
I don't know. My whole thing is because now I've become a big Universal fan, that every time I go to Disney World now, I want to tack on a day to go to Universal. But who's to say that if we built a 5-park destination around Austin, if Universal wasn't like, well, we can't just let them go there and not follow. I think it's more fun, and I think for podcast purposes, I say we move it. Like, we don't move it, but we're putting it in Texas.
Well, thanks for coming over to the dark side. So here's what I will say. If you were not swayed, then I would have said it would make it somewhat easier to say, like, hey, we're gonna revamp. But if we're basing it, so here's my final argument, right? Like, okay, if we're basing it on the fact that, like, we're tearing things down, we're gutting it all, rebuilding, I think it would be easier to do that in a new location than it would be in the existing location.
I agree. That's why I said podcast purposes. I feel like we have to.
Yeah.
I think we do. And when I was trying to come up, just for the audience, when I was trying to come up with other places, my initial spot was somewhere in North Carolina. But the problem with that is, one, if you're too far to the west in North Carolina, it's mountainous. And if you go too far to the east, it's a little bit more, like, too much population. Texas, there's not as many trees, too. Like, if you think about it, that you're, like, excavating. So I just ultimately, and winters can be, you don't know. North Carolina, it could snow.
Yeah.
And it's wetter, I believe. So that's why I did it. But that was my backup. initial, and then I was like, you know what? I love Orlando, so it's just going to Orlando.
Well, now I want to go down a research rabbit hole into North Carolina.
I did a little bit. Also,
Okay.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like
Also,
Texas
yeah.
is a little bit more like, let's build things.
Yeah.
I feel like as you get a little bit further north, every state, it's a little more, no, we're not doing that. So I was just a little worried about how North Carolina people would feel. Because they're more, I just feel like more nature. Like, you're going to bring this big theme park. I don't know. Hopefully people in North Carolina are not upset about that. I was born there. I'm allowed to have an opinion. But yeah. Okay, so it's going in Texas.
I love that idea. I mean, I know it was my idea to begin with, but I love it.
Yes.
Okay, so Texas it is. I really do think, especially when we talk about, like, because the end user experience will not be too significantly different, right, from the weather that we have come to know and love in Florida. So I think that when we can kind of consider that to be a safe choice when we think about the next phase of this rebuild. So, okay, I love this idea of being in Texas. So now that we have our location, where do we go from here?
Well, I think we need to start with the original park, Magic Kingdom, and remember that we're kind of combining Disneyland's Magic Kingdom and Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom, but that doesn't mean we can't pull in different attractions from other parks to come into the new Magic Kingdom. So just keep that in mind, but I think that's where we need to start.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I honestly cannot wait. Magic Kingdom is by far my favorite park. And so I'm hoping that the ideas that I bring to the table do it justice. I know if this park, the park I'm envisioning, if it existed, I would probably be there every day. But then again, if I could live near Disney, I would be there every day anyways.
Oh, that's a good point. So should we, since we're going to do Magic Kingdom first, what is the overarching theme of Magic Kingdom? Like, what do you feel makes up a Magic Kingdom?
That's a great question. For me, a castle park is the ultimate, like, Disney park. So it's princesses, it's magic, it's animated adventure, and it's Disney classics. So for me, that's the way I envision the new Magic Kingdom.
I would agree with that. I think that's, like, I definitely think you have to have princesses. That's got to be, like, a big part of it. And so I will be curious, and we won't spoil too much about what we do about some of the other lands. Like, are we keeping them? Are we not? Because let's remember Disneyland, Walt's original park, had 4 main lands, and Fantasyland was the home of the animated films, and Tomorrowland was the promise of the future. Are we keeping, like, Tomorrowland? We don't know. So, if it were up to us...
Well, you'll just have to listen.
But what are we naming it?